Okay, this next section we want to discuss calcitonin and parathyroid hormone. Calcitonin and parathyroid hormone. But before we introduce that, let's look at the importance of this. Calcitonin and parathyroid hormone are involved in controlling blood calcium balance. Okay? The blood calcium level should be in a range between 8.5 and 10.5 milligrams of calcium per deciliter of blood. The median value about 9.5. Parathyroid hormone, which we will discuss very briefly, raises blood calcium level if the calcium level is too low, and calcitonin lowers it. Parathyroid hormone is the major hormone. Rarely does calcitonin have to get involved. If the blood calcium level is too high, and the PTH level drops, but the blood calcium level still is too high even after the PTH level drops, then calcitonin will become involved. But normally, everything is being controlled by the rise and fall of PTH. Okay? Now, when we look at it, what's the problem with too high calcium, too low? Well, hypocalcemia can cause increased excitability. It can cause twitchiness, the increased excitability and muscle tetany. Hypercalcemia inhibits neuron and muscle cells, may cause heart arrhythmias. And as I said, calcium is controlled by parathyroid hormone and calcitonin. Calcium is involved in so many things. Calcium is involved in muscle contraction, secretion, neurological activity. The most important thing is going to be the neurological activity, because if you recall, calcium is required to be by endocytosis to cause synaptic vesicles to pull to the surface to allow neurotransmitter substance to do exocytosis. So go back and kind of look at all the tremendous functions that calcium does. All right. Calcitonin, I'm going to come back here. Calcitonin's function is going to be here. Okay, or should I say its source? Right here is the thyroid gland. We said these were follicular cells. The cells in between here are the parafollicular cells. The parafollicular cells are the ones that secrete calcitonin. Calcitonin is an antagonist to parathyroid hormone. It inhibits osteoclast and the release of calcium. So calcitonin lowers blood calcium level. Let's go further. It stimulates calcium uptake and incorporation into bone matrix. Is regulated by negative feedback. No important role in humans because, as I said, it's a secondary hormone. It's secondary. It will function, but PTH is the main player. It will function, but PTH is the main player. Okay? Let's go further. The parathyroid hormones glands are parathyroid glands. Let's go here. Come down. And let's look at the parathyroid glands there. Here are the parathyroid glands. This is the back of the thyroid gland, and you have these four nodular looking structures. Those actually are parathyroid glands, which ride the back of the thyroid gland. And what you have are 4 to 8 tiny glands, generally 4, but it may be more. They contain cells, oxyphil, and chief cells that secrete parathyroid hormone, also called parathormone. It's the most important hormone in homeostasis. As I alluded to, calcitonin takes a very low role, and And that's why in the previous slide, removal of it rarely does anything in equilibrium of the homeostasis of calcium. But however, it can function. It can function, but rarely does it ever have to get involved. And you can see it's only a few cells because they're the parafollicular cells. Okay, we go a little further. The function is stimulates osteoclasts to digest bone matrix. Remember, bone is the storage for calcium. Bone is the storage for calcium. Strange enough, I sometimes will ask, what's the most important need for calcium? And obviously, many people say, oh, the bone. Actually, it's not. It's the last in line. It's a depository. So think about it this way. If the economy suffered where cash was getting lost, if you knew, let's say, a bank was going to fail, what would be the first thing you would do? Go and draw your money out because you knew the FDIC takes a while. You draw your money out, which would make the bank fail faster. So, but a strong bank means a strong economy because the people would have enough circulated cash to put some in the bank, then the bank could loan out money. But it's still the last in line after you pay your bills. So I want you to think about bone in that way when it comes to calcium. You first must take care of all the functions in the body of calcium. That's muscle contraction, nerve action, coagulation, whole plethora of functions. Look them up. Then whatever calcium is left over that does not need to do those functions in this millisecond will be put in the bone. So the bone is a depository. It's the last one in line and the first one to pull from if the circulating calcium level is low. So it functions to stimulate osteoclasts. Remember, those are bone dissolving cells to digest bone matrix. And that resorption would release calcium and phosphorus. Okay? Promotes activation of vitamin D, increases absorption, negative feedback. Now I want to get to this vitamin D aspect right here. This vitamin D. We're going to look at that. Vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin. Okay? Vitamins A, D, E, and K are fat-soluble, and the B complex and C are water-soluble. Vitamin D is the only vitamin that can act as a hormone because it actually is the actor for parathyroid hormone. Vitamin D does all the functions of PTH and actually does them better. Cells that have receptors for PTH also have receptors for vitamin D. The tie in PTH and vitamin D is that PTH is needed to maximally activate the enzymes in the kidneys to take D2 to D3. Now let's go here and look at vitamin D formation. Okay, vitamin D is a steroid. Cholesterol is converted by enzyme action to 7-dehydrocholesterol in the skin cells of the stratum basale and spinosum. 7-dehydrocholesterol then is converted to cholecalciferol by UV light in the skin. UV light. That gives me D1. This is where vitamin D and light comes in, ultraviolet light. Cholecalciferol can be converted to 25-hydroxycholecalciferol, which is vitamin D2. 25-hydroxycholecalciferol can be converted to D3. These here, D1 and D2, really are not active forms of vitamin D. It's D3. D3 is the active form of vitamin D. The 25-hydroxy to 125, that enzyme that does that. Now this here, let me just start. This is in the skin, this is in the liver, and this right here is in the kidney. The kidney does that final conversion, enzymes in the kidney. But in order to do the final conversion, the enzyme that does this final conversion needs PTH to activate it. So parathyroid hormone's best work is done on the kidney in order to activate the enzyme to take vitamin D2 to D3, which is the active form. So I go back here. The tie in PTH and vitamin D is that PTH is needed to maximally activate enzymes in the kidneys to take vitamin D2 to D3. So that's where this comes in, promotes activation of vitamin D by the kidneys. Okay? So if you want to increase calcium, what do? You dissolve the bone, you decrease glomerular filtration and of calcium, and shall I say this? You increase reabsorption of calcium in the tubules of the kidney, increase reabsorption, so you don't urinate out as much. In the GI tract, you would increase intestinal absorption of calcium. So you would do everything, you would try to decrease elimination of calcium from the body and increase the amount that's being taken from the bone. Okay? And so this kind of shows again what's happening in this scenario. Hypocalcemia stimulates parathyroid to release PTH and these actions here that we brought up. Okay? Hyperparathyroidism due to a tumor, bones soften and deform. Because why? Because you'd be pulling too much calcium out of them. Hypo, following organ trauma or removal, results in tetany, respiratory paralysis, and death. Remember, hypoparathyroidism would do what? Decrease the amount of calcium. Okay? So this is what you're looking at there. Okay? All right. So we will then end here and start another subject.